Today on the Break It Down show, 14-time New York Times bestselling
14
author.
times.
Yeah, 14 of them, man.
Damn.
Jim DeFelice.
Who else can you think of that has 14 New York Times bestselling books?
That's really not a stat that I can just fire off.
Right.
But if I could take a stab at who's got 14 of them,
Yeah.
Stephen King,
Right.
Tom Clancy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, deep, heavy hitters in the literary world. Absolutely.
So you coined a pretty cool phrase that I liked that I'm latching on to, which
All
was
right. Multi-genreist.
multi-genre. He's a multi-genreist.
He is.
I mean, he writes books,
That's right.
nonfiction and fiction.
Right.
He writes biographies.
Yes.
And then most recently, or how we got to him was
Right.
he collaborates.
Yeah, he collaborates and writes autobiographical things. And let's not forget, he's got screenplays. He's got an active pilot going on right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what his role is with Chris Kyle's movie, but
He's in the know.
and then if I haven't said screenplays, he also writes stories for video games.
Yeah.
Was instrumental in that.
And maybe everybody doesn't know about that, but what happens with a video game that's in development is first, a compelling story has to be written.
Right.
Because nowadays, a character in a video game isn't just Mario.
Right. Yeah.
But there has to be a story back there. And even back then, I mean, there was a story that everybody understood. But nowadays, there are twists and turns in the plot and things that make characters tick that make for good video gaming. And so he is instrumental in the development of video games by crafting those stories. He also is just a great guy.
He is a great guy.
So
I love that guy. I mean, he's so down to earth, so humble. And that really is a theme that we've noticed between the people we've had on the show.
well, we've been really lucky.
We have been.
And we certainly were lucky with Jim DeFelice. So
Yeah.
here it is. Enjoy it, everybody. 14-time New York Times best-selling author
And the guy with the most deadliest friends in the world.
and a friend of many, many badasses.
Yes.
Jim DeFelice.
Thanks. It's funny though, and I'm certainly proud of it, but you think that, oh, this is going to change my life, and not to say that it's not cool that a lot of people are reading your stuff. It's really fantastic. But, I still take the garbage out every week and, still have to look after the dog and all that stuff. So
That's
like
funny
I said,
because that's a
gotta keep it
recurring
interesting.
theme of
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
guests on the show. They go, yeah, I did this neat thing. That's cool. My mom called me this morning and I had to, run by the store for her because whatever, it's like you said, maybe not life-changing in the things that we imagine, but 14 New York Times bestsellers. And here's the thing that needles at me that I'm dying to know about you, because you've written 14 New York Times bestsellers, but a number of them have been with guys like Johnny Walker and Chris Kyle and Dick Marcinko. And what happens if we're in a bar and I'm just not feeling it that day and I put my finger in your chest?
I probably would at some point when I was younger would certainly have flown into a rage and gotten into a fight and probably gotten my butt kicked, to be honest with you. I'm sure I would have gotten my butt kicked.
Well, does that have anything to do with, what do you think it is about your writing style, your voice in particular, that makes you attractive to these guys who are certified badasses who say, you know what, I'm going to get Jim because he can really help me tell this story effectively?
Yeah, I don't know. To be honest with you, I think I've just been very lucky. And, I haven't done anything worthy, anywhere on the same, in the same level that these guys have done, that Dick or Chris or even, or Johnny or, it's just a lot of guys. What I do is I listen to what people tell me, and and I try to, and in books like that, I try to express for them, their thoughts and put their perspective on paper or electrons, whatever you want to call it. And that's what I do. I'm not, I'm not the guy that got medals. That wasn't what I do.
Well, can you talk us through that process? So let's say, you have somebody with a compelling story who's not an experienced writer, but who has lots to tell. You collaborate for the very first time. It's the first meeting. You sit down. What does that look like? And how does that process go from it's nice to meet you to we have a book?
Yeah, it's always different, because everybody, there's different personalities involved, and you try to reach a rapport, and sometimes it's surprisingly easy. I mean, if you look at Chris Kyle and American Sniper, on paper there's there's no connection and no similarity between me, who's a kid from New York, raised or born in New York City, and under very different circumstances than Chris Kyle, who is a Texas cowboy. But we just started talking one day, and he certainly impressed me with some of the things he said, and I'm not sure to this day why he decided to get along with me and and trust me to tell this story. But Chris, there was just kind of this instant connection. Chris was very, very honest, very upfront, very into, like, I'm just gonna just let it all hang out and just tell you the truth, and I really admired that, and maybe that's from my side, that's was one of the things that I clicked in. Someone like like Dick Marcinko, who among many other things, is kind of the father of SEAL Team 6. We initially were put together by the publisher, as kind of a business thing, and again, I think Dick, at least at the start, took more of a business approach, like, because he had a lot of experience and, with people. But I, in talking to him, again, he's just like, you can tell why the guy is a leader, why people, were willing to, to follow him to their death, because he just has that way of inspiring people. And hopefully after a while, and maybe some trials and tribulations and maybe a few drinks, I think Dick, realized that, a trust kind of built between us. But it's always different, it doesn't always work. But when it does, you have something special.
When you recognize that it doesn't work, is it typically early enough in the process that you can pull the plug without getting too far into it, or has it been on occasion times where you would really dig in and have months invested into something before you realize, this just isn't falling into place the way we both need it to?
Well, for the most part, the things that I work on are very high profile, and there's a lot at stake for everybody involved.
Everybody, right?
And the publishers especially, and if
they try to tend to sniff those things out early.
Well, I not to flatter myself, but and let me go ahead and blow my own horn here, but
sure.
To some extent, the things that I'm brought into, it's because I can work it out, and there is going to be a book, and there is going to be a really good book. And there have been a couple of cases where where we had to work, and we had to work at the book, and I think that we got something that was very successful commercially. It didn't matter whether we were on the same wavelength or not. It didn't really matter. We got the book is really the thing that's important at the end of the day. It has nothing to Jim DeFelice. Doesn't matter. It's the book, and I think that one of the things that you have to do when you're collaborating is you really just kind of put your ego aside. Having said that, in like American Sniper and Johnny Walker and in the books with Dick, in order to really write those books, and hopefully I think that they're all critical successes as well as commercial successes, which are different things, or artistic successes, I would say.
Yeah.
In order to kind of do those, it's impossible not to have kind of an intimacy and kind of a relationship with a person, at least to the point that they trust you, that you're not going to mess them up.
Misconstrue the story or twist what they have to say or their overall message.
Yeah,
maybe burn
exactly.
them somehow.
And I think
burn them somehow. I'm trying to avoid like bad words, and it's kind of.
You definitely have, at least, obviously you can write, but you also have a gift of collaboration, because when you look at your bio, you work with other authors even, and so you're a good collaborator, and someone, I would imagine the publisher thinks, hey, this person needs some help. Let's get Jim on the phone and collaborate up, because clearly you have that skill.
Well, and everybody's got an interesting story to a degree, and when you have somebody who's done something extraordinary, they certainly have an interesting story buried in there somehow, but not everybody has the craft And I think that's where you come in, is you can marry the interesting story with the process, the craft, and pull it out for all its compelling detail.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, that's a big part of it. They also have to be willing to, to go there.
Yeah.
And by going there, I don't mean, listen, as far as Chris was concerned, there was a lot. There's a lot of stuff that he did that we couldn't put in the book because it's classified.
Yeah.
And, but that wasn't really, those things weren't the essence of who he was, and they weren't the essence of that story. His being willing to go to the essence of who he was is really what made that's really the thing that made that book kind of break out of its category. And, it's all due to him as far as I'm concerned.
Wow. And that's what we're talking about here is your ability to help a guy break out of his category, because I was talking with we were instant messaging with a friend of mine who lives down in Carlsbad. We were there at a SEAL fundraiser.
And you got out of that alive. That's the interesting thing there.
We had to sneak out.
Yeah. We partied with a whole room full of SEALs and the Escondido Fire Department, who was gracious enough to throw the whole thing. And we managed to slither out of there completely unscathed.
Wow.
Before the drinking got heavy. So the drinking, thankfully, was moderate all day, and before it got heavy, Pete and I had the wisdom to pull the Irish goodbye and slither on out. But no, it was a great crowd and a really nice bunch of guys. And I want to talk in a moment about that community of guys and just sort of the way they operate and how you relate to that. But I sent a message to a friend of mine who we didn't have time to go see. His name is Dave. If you're listening, Dave, this was inspired by you. We didn't have time to go see him, but I wanted to reach out, and I felt obligated to tell him that I had come to town. I didn't want him to find out later that I was there and didn't reach out. So he asked me what I was doing, and I told him I'm interviewing a guy whose book is called Codename Johnny Walker, and it's a great book. You should check it out. So he instant messaged me back. I could tell he was, we were IMing, so he was online. He said, well, what are you doing down here that you don't have any time to have a meal with your friend? And I said, I'm down here interviewing a guy whose book is called Codename Johnny Walker, and it's a terrific book, and you would dig it. He's one of the guys who takes his fitness very seriously. He's a SEAL CrossFit. I'm talking about Dave in Carlsbad, SEAL CrossFit. I'll give them a little shout because he's really dedicated to it. And so I said, hey, this is something you dig. And the first comment that he made was, I'm going to go get this book right now. And the second comment was, hey, it's Jim DeFelice, and I love all kinds of his stuff. So you kind of sell yourself short, but your ability to help these guys tell a story, help a guy who's done something extraordinary but who is not an author, does resonate with people, and it does carry some weight with people, and it sells books.
Great. Good to hear. Call the publisher, tell them.
Yeah, really.
I've been very, as I said, I've been very fortunate and able to work with people in a variety of areas, and it's great. It's what I love to do.
Yeah.
You've partnered with a lot of other authors too, though. So not just service members, but people that are also fellow legitimate, incredible authors in their own right.
Well, how about this? If you had the ability to collaborate with somebody out there who you think has an interesting story but that you haven't worked with yet, who is that person?
Do I get to talk to like people in the past? I mean, I would love imagine Abraham Lincoln.
Man.
Or George Washington. From George Washington's point of view, that's a thing.
Well, those guys, I think, were so burdened with writing the documents that were being committed to the history of the country that, it would be fascinating for you.
Wouldn't it be cool? I mean, imagine, like, with Lincoln just sitting in the Oval Office and everywhere else he goes. I don't know, the Lincoln bedroom, whatever.
Yeah.
And, going up to Gettysburg and just listening to him and talking in snatches. I mean, a lot of the books, a lot of the books that we're talking about, the memoirs, while there's certainly hours and hours and days of formal interviews, to be honest, a lot of the best insights and the best lines come from just chilling with the person or just hanging out or, occasionally talking over the phone or a text, because it's in those unguarded moments, it's in those moments where the rapport really pays off. And just kind of being there, whether you're with, frankly, a lot of the Johnny Walker book, the best stuff came when Johnny and I Johnny lives in the Southern California area, and we would, kind of jump in his car and just drive out in the hills. And just he would just open up and start talking, and a lot of the heart of the book, not necessarily most of the information, but the heart of the book, I think really came from some of those drives and talks, and maybe one or two times we might have had a beer or something like that. Maybe
with Johnny. Wow.
Hey, remember, not only did we spend, I forget whether it was more than a year working on the book, but I also spent 6 weeks on the road with him. So,
oh man, yeah.
Oh, so you guys had the opportunity in 6 weeks on the road to have a drink. Wow.
And
color me surprised.
I survived.
You did.
You did.
The other thing that's amazing about Johnny is, Johnny, the book came out in February, and a lot of the promotion was back east in the Northeast where I live. So there was a lot of snow. And Johnny, snow, for me, snow is snow. For Johnny, snow is snow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that was quite amusing.
And where he comes from, there is snow in Iraq. He comes from Mosul, and there is snow there, but it's like, oh, look, it's snowing in Dallas today. And everybody loses their mind, and then it goes away. Northeastern snow, different story for him for sure.
Johnny never saw snow like he saw snow. He came up to my house, and he wouldn't go outside. He was, we wanted to get him outside for a snowball fight, and he adamantly refused. And finally, one of the guys who really was a good friend of ours, and who actually spent a lot of time kind of, in a security role and kind of in a, friend kind of role, finally took him outside and dunked his head in the snow. And I don't think Johnny's forgiven him yet.
I bet he hasn't.
That's funny. So would you say that demographically speaking, a lot of the audience for the kind of book that you wrote with Johnny is in your neck of the woods in that part of the country?
I think it's spread out. There's a lot of people. There's a lot of readers. There's a lot of readers in the Northeast, obviously.
Yeah.
There's a lot of readers, across the country. And one of the interesting things to me about in the events that we went to in some of the smaller towns, and not necessarily in New York or California, small towns. There are small towns in both of those states, but in the middle of the country. That we would get a lot of people out, and I see this in a lot of the books, and Chris Kyle, the Chris Kyle book, American Sniper, was a great example. And we went, we're in West Texas, way out, way out, and we would go to a book signing in the middle of the day, 1 o'clock on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and there were hundreds of people there. And now, mostly that was Chris. Mostly they came out to see Chris. But the remarkable thing to me is that these the people had read the book. They wanted and they wanted to talk about the book. So I think that I think there's a misconception that the only people who read things are the people in on the East Coast, and the people on the West Coast, and nobody reads in between. That's BS. To be polite, I'll put it in a polite way. But I've found that people all across America are interested in a lot of the stories that I tell.
Yeah, everybody, I think, is interested in a compelling story. And if the delivery vehicle happens to be a book, then some people who may have less of a propensity to spend time in a library are going to still come out and find that compelling story. I discovered a joy of reading through Dick Marcinko books because I like the subject matter. It was a lot of fun. It was an entertaining read, and so that I think you're doing a service to the literary community in that you're creating readers from people who maybe aren't reading the classics and that are coming to compelling stories for the value of the story and discovering a joy for reading.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think, unfortunately, the way that sometimes we're taught in school, we're assigned books and we have to do, and we forget that the first requirement of any, literary project, of any book really, is to entertain us. And, you look at Shakespeare, I mean,
Wow.
it's entertaining. It's fun. The plays that he wrote were fun at the time.
Right.
And
They're
they're
still fun. Yeah.
They're
They
still
are.
fun. Dickens, same thing.
They are, but I think
they're
it would have been tough for a story like Chris Kyle's to reach me if it had been written in iambic pentameter.
No.
Well, I'll give you that, but absolutely. But 500 years from now or 600 years from now, whatever the time is, will some of the style of writing will have changed. I mean, if you look, I love Fenimore Cooper. It's a lot of fun. His books are a lot of fun. Deerslayer. They're, about the American frontier. They're adventure stories, really. But the style in which they're written was perfect for their time.
Yeah.
But I have
And
to
it's a little
say
tough
now, it's, you got to slog. You got to slog. So, so I understand, things change. But something that I think it was Pete had mentioned earlier, it's the story, the essence of the story is the thing that stays with you.
You're talking about the past and writing and the future. We talked to a lot of musicians on this show, and they lament the days that are gone from selling a lot of albums. That hasn't necessarily impacted the book industry, at least from my perception, nearly as much as it has for music. Why do you think that is? How have books escaped the?
Well, I kind of disagree with you there. It certainly had a bigger impact in music, and I think it was always difficult to make a living as a musician. I think it's probably, at least arguably, more difficult now. But the same thing to an extent, the same things happen in books, and it's not just because of ebooks. And frankly, ebooks. I read ebooks all the time, and I love them. And I think there's a lot more that will be done with ebooks as time goes on. There's a lot of potential in the medium, but from a commercial point of view, things like the growth of used books, the sale of used books, competition from other media. Competition from just from the sheer number of books that are now available, the closing of a lot of small independent bookstores and even large book chains have all had a pretty big impact on on book sales. Now, having said that, I have to admit, thank God I've been fortunate and lucky. I've worked hard, but God has smiled on me many times. It's and I've been very lucky, and, no one should go and, take a hat out and take a collection from me. And, I recognize that, and I'm not asking for sympathy, but I do recognize that for many people in the industry, these are very difficult times. I'm not sure that, I don't know if it'll be possible for many writers anyway in the future to make a living just writing books. The times are changing here too. I'm not saying that's the same, at the same level of, as music, but it is having an impact.
So is it fair to say that music has suffered from just the market flipped, and it's very hard to protect your copyright and draw money out of the audience in the old fashioned, but books, you still have to go physically buy a book, even if it's physically grabbing your ebook and buying it. But you guys suffer more from, a diluting of the audience, because there are more video games, more other pastimes that have taken over where
I think dominated. Absolutely. I think that's a big thing. Now, the other thing is, you realize that you've made it when you're being pirated all over the place, and unfortunately people can download pirated versions of probably just about everything I've written, which is kind of a backward compliment. You try not to think about it, but you're right. I mean, the marketplace, has changed, and there's a lot of positives to it. I mean, a lot more voices now, I think, are being heard because of ebooks, because of things like, the Kindle and, the other services. there's a lot more possibilities for people to write. And I think that that's a good thing. It does make the economics different for a lot of people.
Well, I'll throw in a point of view that's not based on economics, but based on the purity of the industry, and one where you've been able to make a living now, but where you would have been able to make a living, let's say, because you are a craftsman in literature, that you would have been able to make a living at any time period. It's different now because the barrier of entry is a lot lower. I mean, anybody can,
Sure.
You got John and Pete doing a podcast, for crying out loud.
Look out.
The ability for somebody to put their voice out there on something as simple as a blog is, I mean, you can have a blog up by this afternoon.
Yeah.
So there used to be a gate that was kept so that only guys who learned and practiced the craft would get through. And so does that mean, I mean, I heard an interesting statistic that, and I'll get this all mangled, so if you're listening, take it as it's intended. I heard that in something like a 2-week period, we're creating as much content every 2 weeks as was created from the beginning of time to 1974. So that amount of content is just being blasted out. There's a lot of good stuff and a lot of interesting and, revolutionary and remarkable voices who are being heard now that maybe wouldn't have, but there's a lot of crap too. And now I think the fight becomes, how do we save literature from being overcome by all the crap? Would you agree?
Well, I think that's a good problem. I also think that I don't have a solution. I haven't a clue. Hey, you're right. And while I'm at it, let me. I still got to take the garbage out and
Right.
and go run and get some milk from the store. You're right. I don't know what the solution is. Whether probably what happens, or new gatekeepers spring up, that sort of thing. Word of mouth has always been, very important for books anyway.
Yeah.
At least since I've been writing. And
Right.
I think that, I think that's still true. It's just that word of mouth now is more diverse and on the internet. But you're right. But I mean, it's not like it's not like, once that genie is out of the jar, and everybody can express themselves, I'm not sure that, that we're going to put it back. Hopefully people want quality, or at least what I perceive of as quality, and I can keep going, and a lot of the people I know can keep going.
Yeah.
It seems like the quality judge, though, is going to be the ability to create an audience, which you have more access to an audience, but the audience has more options. So if you can't put out a good product, then you're going to struggle to find people to consume it, and therefore, you haven't met the quality mark.
And it seems you haven't run into that obstacle.
Well, first of all, I think, yes, you do have to have quality. But I know, I got to tell you, I know a lot of people, and I've read a lot of books that I thought, quite frankly and quite honestly, I thought, this is a fantastically written book. This is a great story. This book, everybody in the country should read, or at least 50% or whatever. And the book hasn't done well. So I don't know. I don't know. I think it's probably always been that way. I think that there's always, if you want to get philosophical, there's tons and tons of artists who look at art history, who did works that today we think are among the best paintings ever, and yet they couldn't get.
And they died in poverty.
Yeah, they died in poverty. They were, they couldn't scratch 2 nickels together to get a meal. And, and it's like that in music. It's like that in, all the arts, and writing is just one.
Sure. Back to American Sniper. There's
Sure.
a big movie coming out this holiday season.
Yeah, there is a big movie coming out. I'm really excited about it. Clint Eastwood is directing it. Bradley Cooper is starring it.
It's ridiculous.
In it.
Yeah.
So, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And, I don't know which one of those two things I'm more excited about, because Bradley Cooper is the real deal.
I'll tell you, what's amazing to me is I've seen the trailer. I've seen some of the stills from the movie. And obviously, I know that it's not Chris, and I know the difference. But, I'll tell you something. Cooper has made himself look a lot like Chris.
Wow.
Really?
You know, you look at, I'll tell you, from the distance, if you don't know Chris well, you know, from the distance and shadow, you might not be able to tell them apart.
Wow.
I mean, he has put everything in that movie. And you know, the other thing about, you know, Bradley Cooper that I think some people didn't realize or don't know, he's done a lot of stuff for veterans on the, you know, he didn't go out of his way to get publicity, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
The other thing is he read the book very early on, probably right when it came out. I forget exactly what the circumstances were, but he went out of his way to get a hold of Chris and personally went after getting the rights to the book. There are a lot of people who wanted to do it as a movie, and Bradley Cooper believed in it from, you know, the moment he read it, and he really sold himself to Chris.
Boy, that only makes me more excited
to do it.
Yeah, that makes me more excited too.
You know, so it's pretty. You know,
that's huge.
You know, it's cool. It's huge. It's immense.
So we were at the podcast the other day with Johnny, and we were trying to decide who plays Johnny in the movie.
When you figure that one out, you tell me.
Yeah, he is one of a kind.
I think it's got to be Johnny.
Man, I know, right? He'd have to play himself, do like the Howard Stern thing. Yeah,
Who can capture that?
We came up.
It's
we
impossible.
actually, you know, it's funny. We had a brainstorming at some point, so we did have a list of people, but I think Johnny's the one.
You got to capture the darkness, but the sweetness, and then the absolute animal that is Johnny.
That is Johnny Walker.
Yeah. And I don't know that person exists in this country.
Well, we decided we were
God,
going to
I
put
think.
Al Pacino on a phone book. We were going to put Al Pacino on an LA phone book and maybe get there that way.
But it would be Al Pacino from, you know, he's a little younger than, well,
Right.
he's
Yeah.
older than, what I'm trying to say is he's not the same age anymore.
Maybe Al Pacino just reflects, and then there's a younger,
could be.
you know,
That could be.
yeah. That's
Well, I feel like we're getting somewhere with this.
yeah.
So you didn't have anything to do with the process of the film as it developed at all?
No. Coincidentally, the screenwriter happens to be a very good friend of my cousin, John Yates, who's a superb screenwriter, Oscar-nominated screenwriter and director in his own right. But actually, we didn't actually know that connection until a few months ago, which is kind of
Isn't
funny.
that funny? Yeah. Hey, will you relay the story that we talked
Because
about?
I'm not sure I wrote it right on my phone.
Now that's funny.
Authors spell phonetically too.
Yeah.
You know, the truth is I'm a terrible speller.
Yeah. You know, I've
Hey,
heard,
that gives a lot of hope to a lot of
Right.
young authors who may listen to this podcast and think, man, I feel like I have something to say, but I can't spell for shit.
well, really, seriously, there's a growing movement, and some elementary schools have put it into place where they don't teach spelling anymore.
Well, I feel as a reaction to my schooling. When I was in grammar school, I went to a Catholic elementary school, and the nuns were extremely strict on everything, including spelling.
Sure.
And you know, I just think it was my way of rebelling, you know, against the nuns by misspelling everything. Of course, this was a subconscious, thing.
A subconscious rebellion.
Yeah,
That's
either
the
that
most
or I liked
sincere
it.
kind.
It must have been either that or I like getting whacked on the knuckles with a ruler for misspelling.
Well, everybody's
That's
got
a
a
different
hobby.
show.
Yeah. That's
Hey, Jim, we were discussing Chris Kyle and how he sold his story. Will you talk about that again? And so the question I'd asked you was who does Chris Kyle go to sell his story?
A lot of people wanted to write about Chris or tell his story, including when he was in the service, basically, as his legend grew. Chris said no. Chris would tell them no. A number of people came to him and he just, kind of put them off. Towards the end of his service, the last couple of years, there were at least two people that I know of who, were actively trying to write his story and basically told him, look, we're going to write about you no matter what you say. And I know that parts of his story are actually included in some other books. Chris just kept saying no, and didn't want his story out.
he was being a good warrior.
Yeah, and but it's also Chris. I think he felt that I did my job, and I really don't want to brag about it, and I see no purpose.
Yeah.
And then he got out, and it became clear that those two guys were going to go ahead with the project. And right around that time, the one of the editors at William Morrow, or HarperCollins is the overall company, got a hold of Chris. He had heard about the story. Actually, the part that Peter had heard was the number of kills that Chris had, which was remarkable. And, he got a hold of Chris. I think he emailed him first, and then he managed to get a hold of him by phone and said, listen, I'd love to do your story. And they talked a little bit, and I don't know whether Peter, I have to ask Peter whether he knew that, that somebody else wanted to do it or not. But in any event, at that time, Chris had realized that the story was going to come out no matter what. And, he wanted it to come out right. And he wanted it to, to be truthful and not aggrandize him. He wanted to honor the people. He thought that the people who were with him were just as important. So anyway, Chris, tentatively said that he would think about it, that he would do it. At that point, that's kind of the point where I get involved, and Peter Hubbard got a hold of me and asked me if I'd be interested.
Well, I'm glad you said yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I only said yes, to be honest. I only said yes because after talking to Chris, because I had some other projects going on, and we had a phone call. We had a phone conversation, and I asked him why he wanted to write the book, and he was extremely sincere and said that he said that other people were going to do it, and he wanted the true story out there. But he also said that he wanted to honor the guys that he had served with, most especially the two men during one of the deployments. It's a third deployment that we write about actually in the book. Two of the guys who were pretty much under his command at the time, at that instant, died. Well, one died, and one was severely wounded, and years later would actually die from the wounds, indirectly from the wounds. And Chris said, I want to give the money that I make from the book to their families, and he was sincere about it. And we talked a long time, and I just at the end of that conversation, I was like, I'm gonna do this because this is the right thing to do, and I'm gonna help. I'm gonna help this guy because he wants to do this, and damn, it's a great idea.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Plus he had a great story. He was willing to, he's willing to go deep, and he was willing to be honest. And the thing about the American Sniper is that in a lot of ways it's not so much about sniping as it is about serving in the war, and it's also about his family life and what his family went through. And I wanted, in writing the book, I wanted to talk. One of the key ideas for me was to talk to Taya, it's Chris's wife.
Yeah.
And, to kind of get her side of the story into the book. No one had done that. Typically, nobody does that in the run-of-the-mill military type book. But to me, that was really, the really kind of interesting thing. And for me, that book is not so much a military book or a shoot 'em book, but it's really a love story. It's about their love and how that kind of survives. And it was always remarkable to me that Chris was willing to give up the job that he loved, the life that he loved, his work that he loved, for his wife, for love. When it went for love. I'll be honest, I don't know that I would give up writing for my family. The hell with them.
Yeah.
No, I love them dearly, but
Yeah.
I don't know that I would stop doing it.
Well, part of the thing about that makes it unique is that what you do and what I do and for a living, it isn't passion that is destructive necessarily to a marriage the way that Chris's occupation could be, because of what he has to go through and the fact that he's gone the amount of time that he's gone and all of those things that make it difficult for service people and their families. And her struggle continues, and one of the things that we were a witness of when we went to the golf tournament for the SEAL Foundation, the SEAL Fund, last week was how many widows
Right.
were there, and their fight becomes the fight of their husband, and his departure doesn't mean that that the fight is over.
Right. And you wonder if it's a noble thing to do to give the profits from your book to two guys that served with you who, both ultimately didn't make it. It's another thing to know in advance that you also won't make it and you can't provide for your family anymore. And you wonder what his decision might have been had he known he'd only had a little time left.
Yeah.
Oh, well, actually, I do know what his decision was in that case. He happened to be, it's not that the funny thing is the book was wildly successful and a lot more successful financially than I know than
he had
it
expected.
would be, and certainly than I thought. I knew it was a good book. I knew it would do really well, but it did really, really well.
Yeah.
And it became very hard. The irony is that it became, when it did so well, that it became very hard for him to, to give the money away. And then, there were some legal battles and that stuff. And as he had to eventually go to basically a financial planner. I forget exactly what it was that he had to do, but in laying it out, the one thing that he did make clear to that, I'll call him a planner, I don't know what he really was.
Right.
It was, okay, if I die, then the money goes directly to help my family because, my wife and my kids, because then they're the family of the fallen.
Right.
And they wrote that down and stuff. And then, but of course they didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, of
and
course.
Then they had the whole plan for, they had to have somebody take care of the money. And then there's all these tax things and this and blah, blah, blah. So, so that was kind of a side, that was 2 minutes of or whatever long of a, several hour conversation. But so I do happen to know what he was thinking, but
Well, it was an important 2 minutes.
yeah,
As
but
it
well,
turns
you know
out,
what though,
unfortunately.
even so though, I don't know the details, but I know they had given a lot of the money away already.
Yeah.
I know they couldn't because of some lawsuits and some other legal stuff, but I think that they have been helping people, and I know that there's an intention to kind of carry on that mission with Taya starting a foundation, or has started a foundation called the Chris Kyle Frog Foundation, and that is going to not just help those people, but help other families as well. So so it's kind of been I think it's kind of been a crooked road, but it's certainly it's getting to the place that he intended.
Well, what I find interesting now that I've had a chance to talk with you and that you've spent this time with us and given us some insight into your selection process and how you've gotten to write the books that you have recently that we're talking about today, is that community is so the guys that job attracts are not you think gung-ho war hero types, the guys who sort of aggrandize that growing up would be the guys who would attempt that career, but those aren't the guys who succeed at it. And the guys who become SEALs and become enter that service, enter it to serve.
That's right.
And that absolutely holds true after they come home, because that was the overriding theme of every guy that we talked to. And we talked to a lot of guys last week who had served on, many of them, more than one team. And they were all about the service, and nothing, there was nothing further from their mind than, the glory of getting out there and getting dirty, because it's getting out there and getting dirty, and you quickly realize that. But it really is all about the service. And I find it interesting, and I sort of see that in what you say about why you chose to collaborate with Chris on his story, And the part that I think, as you listed all the reasons, about how you thought the story would do well and all of those things, I feel like you really downplayed your service in your desire to tell a good story. And I know that other artistic people who listen to our podcast are going to pick up on that immediately and go, yep, I knew it. He didn't care about all that shit. He just wants to tell a great story. And I feel like maybe that's what you have in common with the guys in that community that make you an attractive collaborator. Because if I'm that kind of guy that you describe Chris as, and that I think we all have a feeling about him as just being hey, it's not about me, it's about the service, it's about the guys that I served with, and
Right.
It's the team effort and all of that. That is, you're the literary version of that.
Yeah, I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, thanks. I don't. I'm not a SEAL. I'm not a member of their community. I don't talk for them. Like I said, as I think I said before, I've just been very lucky to be in a place where I can listen to people and tell their stories. I agree. In terms of wanting to, the story is the thing, and that's what I want to do, is find the story and tell it. And it's not about me. It's about it's about the story.
Yeah.
As far as the SEALs of
And there again, you spend a
cool,
grand
but-
total of about 4 seconds on that. But
No, the story. I don't want to downplay it. The stories. It is the story's a thing. That's really, and you have to feel that. I'll tell you, over the course of my career, I've written a lot of books, and no matter what book it was or what story I've told, I've done video games and a bunch of other things and scripts, and it's like the reason that you get up at whatever time it is, 4:00 in the morning, and you just work and you stay at that desk is that you get a certain joy out of the story that you're discovering. It's not even with the novels, and I still primarily think of myself as a novelist. I don't know the story until I write it. I'm discovering the whole process is a process of discovery.
yeah,
And I guess in some ways that's probably like a really egotistical thing to do. You're talking, in a way, I'm talking to myself internally anyway for 12 hours or 14 hours a day, but trying through that talk to find the story.
Well, you're good at it, and I know you are good at giving everybody else the credit. But let me give you some credit. You took Johnny's story, an impossible story, from an angle that I don't know anybody else has told, and I've read hundreds of books, and you didn't put your voice in there. It felt like Johnny was talking about it. You fixed grammar and you made it readable, but that is, I don't
which
know.
by itself had to be an incredible challenge.
Yeah.
We love Johnny, but man, that guy, he will fly off the handle and go all kinds of directions. And your ability to corral him must have been like herding cats.
And to give him a voice. You've given him a voice where there couldn't be one, and people just have no idea. As a guy that's been overseas a lot and seen a lot of crazy things, it's hard to relay what's there. And you really captured the essence of the culture of Iraq and Johnny's life. And you told such a good story in collaboration with Johnny that I don't know that there's a lot of authors that could do that. So thank you for doing that.
That was capturing Johnny's voice. Actually, that was one of the cool things about about that book, because Johnny doesn't. Johnny's actually pretty good at English for someone that of his background and training, but Johnny doesn't. That's not his first language.
Yep, and I don't feel like he thinks in English.
No, he doesn't really. And sometimes I think some of the curses are in English.
He's good at that.
Definitely.
Give me another beer. That one's in English
Right.
too.
He's grown well versed in
Yes.
certain
that
subjects.
Yeah.
So the trick was to come up with a way to have a voice in the book that would be in English the way that if English had been his first language. And there's a couple of little tricks I used to kind of convey that. And kind of one of the things that not only Johnny but a lot of Arabic speakers do is they'll take a thought and they'll elaborate on it again, and that's was kind of a kind of a conscious literary technique in the book, and just hanging out with, as I said before, just hanging out with Johnny, and a lot of those long drives. One of the first times we met in person, I think we'd spoken a couple of times. So one of the first times we really met in person, we took a long walk along the beach, which actually made it into the book. It was like times like that where we didn't really say all that much to each other, but we could just kind of watch the other person kind of get into their heads. And, that's really, as I said, every book or every literary project, whatever it is a process of discovery. And that's really the cool thing.
Hey, I only really have one more question, I think. I always say that, and then I have another question. But here's my last big question. When you're on the press tour and you're doing Today's Show and Mike Huckabee and always at the places, do they read the book in advance, or do they have enough understanding, or do they have no flipping clue? Because they appear to have no flipping clue most of the time.
Well, I can't speak for everybody, and I would never, ever, zero in on any show that anybody. But I some occasionally, some do actually, and that's when it's surprising. And I was at what was that? I forget. I was on some sort of show, and the funny thing is, the book, when you're out there and the book has come out, you wrote that book, in most cases, a year ago,
right? And
in some cases even longer. And for me, there's a couple of projects between that, and they may not even be books. They start quizzing you, and it's like, you kind of stutter, and you kind of, I don't know.
I don't remember.
I had and it's always, for me, it's always like, I've got to study up for a final exam. I was on I wrote the biography of Omar Bradley in World War II, and because of that, occasionally I'm on television shows as a supposed expert, on World War II. Well, I'm deathly afraid of getting like something wrong,
a battle wrong, or a historical
or
marker.
something really stupid.
And there's people paying attention out there to that stuff.
Yeah, and it's like, God forbid you say December 7th, 1942.
Right,
it's like,
right.
Yeah, and you can't take it back, and it's like that's I'm always worried. We were doing, I forget what we were doing some show, and at the end of the way that they tape you, and you're finally done, and I stood up and said, "Well, did I pass? Did I pass?" Oh yeah, no, you were good. So. Yeah, so I always pray that I can at least answer the questions and don't really worry about where they're coming from.
Well, that was a great answer, and you didn't betray anybody who helps you on those press tours. So I have two final questions, and I want to say these words so that I capture them. You talk to yourself for 12 hours a day, and you try and capture that, and we really appreciate that you spent an hour talking with us. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, my last two questions are, first, what can we expect to see in the near future?
Well, right now I'm working on a memoir with Ivan Castro, who is a Special Forces captain who was injured in Iraq, blinded actually by enemy, almost killed really, in enemy action, and as part of his recovery became a marathon runner, and is still blind, has done an amazing amount of things, including going to the South Pole, and he's just got an incredible story. He's just an incredible guy, and we're going to come out with that book. That book has just been bought by St. Martin's Press, so that's a lot of fun. One thing that a lot of the people that I work with have in common is they all have great senses of humor. I mean, everybody knows about Dick Marcinko. My God, he's got a great sense of humor. But Chris had a really great dry wit. Johnny really
sure
funny,
does.
if you can understand half of what he's saying.
Yeah.
And Ivan's got a great thing.
Wow.
We have a video game project called Afro Samurai that we're trying to get through.
That sounds terrific.
And
If it's what I
have,
imagine it being, just from hearing those two words put together, that's going to be a lot of fun.
yeah, and I have and as a matter of fact, I have a TV pilot that we're trying to sell. So I've got a bunch of that, and then there's some other book projects.
You're now officially a hardworking Jim DeFelice.
That's right.
That's your new nickname.
The hardest working man in the writing business.
Man, no kidding.
So
a lot of fun. Like I say, it's you got to get up. You have to have a reason to get up every day, and I certainly do.
All right. Well, and then my last question is, and I'm ripping off a podcaster named Mick Betancourt, who I love. His podcast is terrific. He takes no sponsors, but what he does is he prods from his guests. Any local family-owned businesses or anything like that you want to plug and give a personal shout to on the air. Are there any local businesses or any small family-owned operations or anything like that you just want to mention to give them a little boost?
Well, no, but I will say this, that, it's very easy to buy books online right now, but if you want to give somebody a boost, go to your local small independent bookstore and, buy a book there and, help those people out, because in a lot of ways, the independent bookstores are, kind of the future of, and not just, obviously a lot of my books, if not all of them, are going to be found, online and in the big mass places, supermarkets and that stuff. But the small independent bookstores really are keep literature alive. And they're just, those independent stores are just like regular people. It's mom and dad and, maybe some poor kid who got, brought in to help out. So,
yeah.
So let me give those guys a plug.
Well, I'll give a plug. My plug then will be for Bookshop Benicia, right here in Benicia, California, on First Street. They're a little downtown bookshop, and rent downtown is not cheap.
Not cheap.
So for them to be in the boutique location that they are, they really do need and deserve our support. And so we'll take your advice and go to Bookshop Benicia, and I'm proud to say that I ordered a book there.
About 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, that has been sitting there. I haven't had a chance to go by and get it, so I'll go by and get it today. So great advice. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
And Jim, in general,
Jim.
you're a friend of the show. You're part of the family now. So if you ever want to come on and promote something or anything at all, doors wide
I'll make
open.
sure you're going to be sorry for that. But
That's all right. You make me so. Give us the problem of being sorry. We're fine with it. You're fantastic. Cool. We really, and I seriously, brother to brother style. I know Johnny has done so much better than anybody ever would have guessed. Number one, he doesn't live in Detroit or Flint, Michigan,
Right.
and you're a big part of making sure that him and his family are protected, and I have to thank you for that.
oh, good. He's a great guy. Like I say, a lot of these books you really can't do without getting fairly close to the guy. And, anything I can do to help Johnny, I want to do. So.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, I know that Pete and I are going to spend the rest of the day reflecting on the profundity that you've laid upon us in the hour that we've spent with you.
You
I
say
really
profundity
appreciate
or profidity? That don't
know.
matter.
I don't know. Is it on tap? That's my question.
it. Yeah, right. Profundity IPA comes in a special glass.
Oh, yeah.
No, seriously. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.
We really do
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Yeah.